afternoon and welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for what I think is a really important event called Extracting the Future, a conversation on marine sand, ocean justice and resilience. My name is Antje Scharrenberg. I am a researcher in politics and international relations at the University of Southampton in the UK. I will be moderating this event today, and before I introduce you to our amazing speakers, I have been asked to say a few words of context and also the format of this event. So we will be speaking and having a conversation between our amazing panelists for about 25 minutes. And then we will open the floor to questions. We have about 10 minutes to do that. There's not a lot of time, so get your questions ready as the conversation is unfolding. And then we'll give the word back to our speakers at the end to wrap up. So the issue we are discussing today, and you're seeing some images about it here in the background, is the extraction of sand from marine ecosystem for the purpose of land reclamation. Our speakers will unpack this issue and what this means exactly, but before we do that, I wanted to just say two reasons why I think this is a really important event, and an event that, or an issue actually, that doesn't receive as much attention as it probably should, and hasn't received as much attention, I think, in the Green Zone as it should have. The first reason is that this issue that we're discussing here is actually intimately connected to a bunch of other issues that you might have come across in the Green Zone. So this includes deep sea mining, industrial fishing, issues relating to climate change like coral bleaching, which we can trace back to the extraction of fossil fuels, like oil and gas on land and in the sea. And what connects all of these issues is that they are all driven by an extractivist logic that treats the ocean and oceanic ecosystems primarily as a resource for resources to be taken out of it, and kind of prioritizes that over the fact that the ocean is also an ecosystem in crisis, that it's a space that provides livelihoods for local communities. And that's what connects this issue to some of the other issues we might have come across here. The second reason why I think this issue is extremely important is that this extractivism in the context of sand, but also other resources, is an issue that creates global injustices. And that's why we've got the term ocean justice in the title here, again, which is a term that was not extremely present in the Green Zone, but we want to look at in more detail here. And what happens here is that under the guise of the blue economy, there are decisions taken by a few number of actors about policy, about financing, about insurance in one part of the world, and they're having detrimental effects in other parts of the world that threaten ecosystems and that threaten people's livelihoods. But the issue, and some of these issues we'll be discussing in more detail, is that affected communities are not really involved in these decision-making processes. So as a result, I think it's important to contextualize sand mining as an issue of justice, as an issue of global justice, and that's what we'll be discussing. So to unpack that, I'm going to introduce you to our fabulous speakers in the order in which they will speak. So we'll start with Stephanie Chua from UNEP-GRID, based in Geneva, Switzerland. Then next to you, we've got Humay Abdulghafour, Save Maldives campaign lead. Next to Humay, we've got Terence Repelente, community organizer from Pamalacaya, Filipinas, the National Federation of Small Fish Folk Organizations in the Philippines. Next to Terence, we've got Muhammad Al-Amin, Executive Director of WELGI, South Sulawesi from Indonesia. Then we've got Janila Castro from Kalikasan, spokesperson for the network for the environment, People's Network for the Environment in the Philippines. And next to Janila, we've got Murta Shannon from Both Ends in the Netherlands, Senior Policy Advisor. Welcome to all of you. So we wanted to start the first part of our conversation by looking at what is at stake in this issue. Again, assuming that maybe not all of you have heard about sand mining and what the problem is here. So thinking about what is at stake, I would like us to start with the material actually that is at stake and talk about the sand itself. So Stephanie, could you kick that conversation off by telling us a bit more about why sand matters and why it also is a global issue?
Thank you, Antia. So when I say sand, you might think because where it needs, and maybe because summer holidays is around the corner of a beach. But sand is actually a fundamental building block of our modern society. We need it to build roads, hospitals, our schools, for the energy transition. So solar panels, wind farms, you name it. It is the most extracted solid material on Earth. Over 50 billion tons every year. And if you compact that material, it's enough to build a wall 27 meters high, 27 meters wide, all around Earth's equator. And that's every year. And in the ocean context, sand mining is also referred to as dredging. And dredging is a process by which a dredging vessel goes into the ocean, reach down, dig up, suck up sediment, silt, sand, and it happens in shallow waters. And we do this for a multitude of reasons, to deepen our waterways, to build infrastructure, so airport, ports, harbors, and more relevant and important to the topic today, for land reclamation. And why do we care about this? Because it creates impacts to the environment and to the people. And since 2000, we have reclaimed a landmass to the size of Luxembourg. So it's a massive exponential issue. And beyond that, we've calculated that every year we dredge up 6 billion tons of sand and sediment from the ocean, and 15% of that is in and from marine protected areas, and the real number is probably higher. So in the face of this, we need to talk about, in the face of climate resilience and climate change, we need to understand this issue in broader context, and we need to understand what's at stake, what do we stand to gain, and what do we stand to lose.
Thank you, Stephanie. You already started mentioning environmental impacts a little bit, so let's unpack that a bit. And I wanted to ask Humay if you could tell us a bit more about moving from the global to the local. What are the real impacts for local ecosystems in the Maldives in this context?
Thank you, Angie. Firstly, I'd like to thank Both Ends and UNEP-GRID for facilitating our presence here today. We're very grateful. As for your question, Angie, marine sand extraction or dredging in the Maldives context raises lots of concerns for us because this is a concern actually for all of us coming from coastal communities, and this is a serious issue for us who are experiencing deeply detrimental effects of sand extractivism on our peoples and the places we are from that we call home. Let me share a little bit of data from the Maldives State of the Environment report dating from 2016, which says, and I quote, "The biodiversity sector of the Maldives contributes to 71% of the nation's employment, 49% of public revenue, 62% of foreign exchange, 98% of exports, and 89% of GDP. As you can tell, this data is extremely significant socioeconomically. But this data does not really take stock of the unquantifiable value of priceless ecosystems, natural systems, on which our lives and our ability to live on these islands depend. The very existence of the Maldives as an archipelagic atoll nation depends on these living natural systems. Marine sand extraction and dredging are permanently destroying these finite ecosystems and the rich biodiversity that supports and sustains all life. It's not just human life, but the more than human environment as well. Dredging activities are degrading natural habitats and disrupting the natural balance of the living environment. We are experiencing the permanent loss and decimation of marine protected areas, biosphere reserves, and ecologically sensitive marine ecosystems through this extractivist activity. And what is most disturbing from our context is that once these ecosystems are lost, we know that we cannot get them back.
Thank you, Humay. And I think it's amazing how you linked the ecological issues already to the livelihoods of people that are affected as well. And Terence, if I could ask you to expand a bit on that, because like Humay said, it's not just an issue on the Maldives, it's in the Philippines as well.
Yeah.
Livelihoods are affected.
Yeah, and also, this is not just, sand dredging and reclamation does not just destroy the environment, it also quite literally destroys lives. In the Philippines, fisher folk have seen a 90% drop in income because of sand dredging activities. So what used to be a stable and intergenerational way of life, fishing, is now becoming unsustainable. In Manila Bay, where around 20,000 hectares are planned for reclamation, and where one project has led to the extraction of 120 million cubic meters of sand, thousands of fisherfolk families have lost access to their traditional fishing grounds. But this is not just about the fish also, this is about basic human rights, the right to housing, the right to food, the right to livelihood, and the right to culture that is connected to the ocean. And I've heard stories of fisherfolk selling their boats because they no longer see a future in fishing. Their children forced to stop school. They were forced to relocate inland where fishing is not sustainable. And this is not just numbers. This is actual lives suspended in uncertainty. These are actual futures that are buried under sand. And for us, what they're saying to us is that this is for development, this is for investment, but for whom and at what cost? This is not development. What we are seeing in our communities is dispossession. It is plunder dressed as modernization. And no amount of reclaimed land can bring back what we have already lost and what we are bound to lose if these extractive practices continue.
Yeah, I think you summarized super well exactly what is at stake. This finding exactly the right words, I think, which is absolutely necessary. So given what is at stake, we want to talk also about what can change. But in order to talk about what can change, we want to spend a little bit of time on how we got to this situation in the first place. So how is it that we are facing these threats of livelihoods and ecosystems in these areas? Let's start with you, Amin, and talk a little bit about what is actually the role of national governments and national legislation. And if you could give us the example of what's happening in Indonesia, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for a very good question. When it comes to government, it's quite sensitive, but I have to explain. National government has a big contribution in promoting season dredging and reclamation projects. Government issued the regulation about area special planning and also put the concession, season dredging concession aside. The government invites local company to access the concession and invite the dredging company to do a dredging in the sea. So I think government have a significant role in promoting and in implementing season dredging in global south, especially particularly in Indonesia. You can imagine that in 2023, Indonesia government issued 3 policies or regulations about export to sand. So you can imagine that Indonesia can export and can trade sea sand to foreign countries. So if your country needs sea sand, you can buy from Indonesia. So Indonesia government can send and export sea sand to foreign countries. For example, to Singapore, to Philippines maybe, probably, and Maldives next year or later in the future. So it is horrible and it is obviously that Indonesia play and government play significant role in promoting success dredging and reclamation project. Because of this regulation, Indonesia has issued 130,000 hectares season dredging concession in Indonesian water. So you can imagine that season is not only for marine ecosystem, but also for the community, for the material, raw material for the frogman. So Indonesia believe that from the export season they can get the income, they can get a lot of money from the season trade. So in the second one, government, even though they issued the regulation about export season, they do not implement also. They don't increase a policy about the environmental and social sector. So it is the one problem how government has a significant role in this situation, in this project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you want to elaborate a bit more on what do you think are the biggest problems when it comes to what the government is doing and not doing as well?
Yeah, the other problem is about the corruption. I think everyone here are very happy with the corruption. So if we are happy with the corruption, I think we have to have also to season dredging activity, because season dredging and reclamation are very close with the corruption. These are making and marine ecosystem damage, and also eviction of the coastal community, especially coastal women. Then because you know that the government paradigm is changed from the ecosystem to economic based. The other things, my reflection in Indonesia, especially in Sulawesi, the season dredging carried out in fishing ground area without public consultation with the local community, with the fisher force, with the women, with the coastal women. Also, season dredging activities in South Sulawesi in 2016 and 2021 carry out before government approved. Before the marine special plan regulation approved by the government. So it is like the project implement before there was regulation. So it is the reality and the fact that how corruption happened and very close with the season dredging project. So I think marine dredging and reclamation are often associated with the corruption and legal irregularities. And another things, many government officials in Makassar and Jakarta jailed for corruption in relation to sand pressing. We also see that the laws for public consultation and compensation are not being implemented, and people are kicked off their land and water without proper notice and livelihood support, livelihood compensation.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, if we have to protest this and mining because it's very close to the corruption.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us a really comprehensive picture of where the problem partially originates. We're going to elaborate on that now, how the problem comes into being. And one of the issues that personally shocked me when I first learned about this is that it's not just national governments in the area helping to bring this problem about, but also prosecuting people who speak up against it. And Janilla, you have experienced this yourself. Could you tell us about your case and what happened to you in the Philippines?
Yeah, so for starters, people defending the coastal and marine environment who are against this reclamation and marine sand extraction are being silenced in various forms in which it is the government who are the main actors. We are being treated as enemies of the state just because we want to oppose these projects of the big local and foreign corporations. Defenders are being harassed, vilified, surveilled, communities are being militarized. In worst cases, defenders are being abducted and even get killed. As Angie said, I myself was abducted last September 2023 while I was investigating a reclamation project happening in our area. We were held for 17 days in which we were subjected to interrogation and psychological torture in various forms. Thanks to the social movement in our country, we were released. But after that, the military filed a case against us. That's the case in our in our country. I think that's the same thing in our areas. As you can see, these are the reasons why we are here, because the defenders on the ground are being continuously attacked. That's why we need more support. But of course, amidst all this, we ocean defenders are firm in our to continue our work, because for us, we have nothing to lose but our source of food, our home, and our future.
Thank you, Janilla. There's one more puzzle piece missing in how the problem comes into being, and that links us back to how we started about this being a global problem. So, Morta, I would like to ask you to explain to us a bit how Western actors, Western governments, Western insurers are related to this problem.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. So what I just really want to make clear here is that there's a very clear transnational dimension to all of these interventions. They don't just happen in the vacuum, right? There's only a handful of dredgers in the world that can pull off the big dredging projects that we're talking about. They're based in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and in China. That's it. That's the global market. And it's not just these companies doing these projects, but the countries in which they're based, they put a tremendous amount of public resources into assuring that those companies win bids and tenders. In the Netherlands, for instance, over the last 10 years, more than 8 billion euros of projects have been insured with export credit insurances. And export credit insurance is a state-backed insurance that covers companies like dredgers and the banks that fund these projects against certain financial losses. So this mechanism plays a very important role in creating the favorable financial conditions for the projects to go ahead in the first place. And what you'll often hear is big EU-based companies that they're, have to comply with all sorts of frameworks, and that they therefore will be more responsible and sustainable with the competition. But if we look on the ground, these frameworks don't really mean very much at all. I mean, all of the impacts that are being described here also involve EU-based dredges, so there's still, the destruction of critical biodiversity, there's still gross human rights abuses. So it's for that reason that we have been campaigning together with our partners and engaging with policymakers at the EU level to really try to get more stringent safeguards and more accountability on the side of the drivers of the capital flows that are behind these projects.
Thank you. I'm going to pick that up. You already started now to talk about the possibility for accountability. So there can be change, and that's the last topic that we wanted to cover before we open the floor. So, like I said before, get your questions ready now. But just one more question to the panel about what could the future look like, both in terms of the dystopia and the utopia. So if we start with the dystopia, I want to ask Humay to tell us again what would happen if business as usual continues, if nothing changes. What kind of future are we confronted with?
Thank you, Anjay. Yeah. So what business as usual is doing is destroying the natural defenses and the natural foundations of our coastal communities. And that includes reefs, lagoons, mangroves, sandbanks, seabeds, seagrass beds, and the seabed, which are all integral parts of our ecosystem. And the coastal communities depend on these natural defenses. All these ecosystems are endangered in the Maldives because they are falling victim to dredging and reclamation activities disguised as a necessary prerequisite to a notion of development, as Terence referred to earlier. And that causes widespread deprivation, dispossession, resource loss, and actually a lot of wastage as well. And these are abstract externalities for the business as usual folks. But when our living ecosystems are degraded and destroyed in the name of development, our communities are exposed to increased erosion, flooding, sea and storm surges, and the vagaries of unknowable uncertainties of climate events and the effects of the changing climate, which we are experiencing already. And research done by some French scientists from two French universities have concluded that in the Maldives, and I quote, this is very, very relevant for us, over the last decade, island change was rapid and primarily controlled by anthropogenic drivers. The great majority of inhabited and exploited islands now exhibit an altered to annihilated capacity to respond to ocean climate pressures, unquote. So this is the situation we find ourselves in as a direct result of business as usual. And the extractivist development of this method has been undermining the natural resilience of our islands. It also creates a lucrative business cycle for a few, where destroyed islands need fortification. So this is usually the solution is hard engineering. And this is also provided by the same actors. So they come and they destroy, and then they offer the solutions as well. And they claim to have the expertise to provide the solutions as well. So these actors are causing the harm, and these actors allege to have the expertise and offer the solutions to the harmful impacts they impose on us in the first place. This is actually a cycle of loss upon loss. These activities are undermining the resilience of present and future generations by destabilizing the integrity of our islands that have actually existed and been settled on by our people for millennia on the living ocean and its coastlines. So business as usual, actually, Anjay, is extracting the future. It is robbing the future. Business as usual is a danger to our ocean resilience. Business as usual is a roadmap for present and future generations to become climate refugees. So we reject this. We oppose this, and we fight back because we must. Brilliant.
Thank you. I want to turn the question around. You already started doing that, which is resistance is needed, opposition is needed. What else, if we think about a better future that we can build to, what else can we do, Stephanie, from your perspective, to change this situation?
Thank you, Antia. Well, first, I would like to say that the work that my colleagues here by the civil society is extremely important, because what we see that are happening happens on the ground, and that we need these voices represented. But if I could just take a moment to go kind of up to the global level of things, there needs to be a recognition of the value of sand left in place. So sand extracted contributes to the built environment, but sand left in place has a tremendous value to biodiversity and ecosystem services that's not recognized. And when it's not recognized, we only see it as a commodity. And that is one of the root causes of our problems. So what could that potentially mean? It could mean better governance, for one. If let's say there is a need for dredging, and oftentimes it might be for a project that no one needs, that, you know, that just like we've described. But we are also facing climate change, and there needs to be certain dredging works for climate resilience. There needs to be long-term planning. Very few countries have accounted for the sand resources need till the end of the century. So this is, we're talking about beach replenishment, we're talking about certain kinds of infrastructure needed in the face of sea level rise. But we don't know how much we need, we don't know how much we have. And let's not even talk about the big mega projects. They are signed off without knowing where they're going to get the sand. So what that translates to is we get the sand from wherever it's available, where it's biodiversity rich. We talk about deep sea mining, but the sand dredging that's happening at shallow waters, this is where things are lush, this is where things grow and life thrives, right? And we're messing with it, just like we've heard. So better governance could also mean, in a very boring way, that we have an international minimal environmental standards, even though voluntary, but if it's put into a contract, it's legally binding, for example. So these are just steps, right? But I think it starts with the recognition of the value of sand in the environment, for the environment, and for the people's lives depend on it.
Thank you. What did you want to add to that? What can be done from a policy perspective, again, given what you were saying, that we can pin down quite precisely where the problem originates?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, we need like real laws that regulate the conduct and the international operations of multinational corporations. Because the current regulatory context is just toothless. It consists of non-binding frameworks only that can be implemented at will. Yeah, and that's a big problem, as we've been seeing on the ground. And secondly, for the sending countries of these technologies, but also the countries contracting these funds, there's really a need for them to make good on their commitments to the coming Montreal Biodiversity Framework, which states very specifically that there's a need to scale down and phase out harmful incentives that destroy critical biodiversity sites. So no more state-backed assurances for these types of projects. And thirdly, given the fact that the international regulatory context is not up to the task to protecting coastal ecosystems and communities as we've seen here, we need a moratorium on these types of projects. At least the large-scale ones that we're describing here for land reclamations. So that's pretty much the three policy prescriptions that I've got.
Great, thank you so much. So over to all of you. We started a couple of minutes late because people were still arriving, so I'm going to take the liberty to run a couple of minutes over, but not more than that. So let's be quite precise in the questions, and maybe we'll take 2 or 3 questions at a time. And while you're thinking about it, I also wanted to add that, of course, the images you've been seeing in the background are not just of dredging, but also of the livelihoods at stake, of the ecosystems at stake, and of the resistance that is taking place. So I hope you got a good visual picture as well of what's going on. I knew there was a question here. We'll take a few at a time, so please add to it.
So first I wanted to thank you all, thank the panel for this great talk. And my question was addressed to Geneva in particular. And I know that you had quite a difficult experience with your detention. And I wanted to know what kind of lessons you drew from straight ecological resistance and the backlash from the government, and how can that be applied, those lessons be applied to other contexts where there's also government repression against ecological protesters? Thank you.
Yeah, I think we'll take another question. We can take 3 questions, and then.
Well, not really a question, but actually a comment, and actually also congratulations to the panel here just voicing out the concerns of your organizations and for your countries of this big problem. Much boils down to governance, I think, what we talked about. And we should put into the whole framework We should talk about good governance, controlling what's happening, whatever aspect, whatever sector you're working with. This is within the mining sector, the land reclamation sector, regime, all these activities associated with that. So basically, it needs to have good governance with a long-term vision to see what you like to do, to understand what will be the implications of your decision-making process and who is involved, so which stakeholders, what time. So this is a process, and it boils down to good governance with transparency. So I'm working for the Netherlands Commission for Environmental Assessment, and we are really supporting governments in that process. And yes, it needs a plan, a very spatial plan, a land reclamation plan with a vision, with long-term objectives on this. There's a tool called Strategic Environmental Assessments, which really would help these plans and governments take the right decision at the right time, considering all the involvement of different sectors on the long term, looking alternative available, having the right stakeholders involved at the right time to make sure that the decision-making process is solid. Whatever it takes, because it could be dredging still, if that's being weighed to whatever implications there are. But there needs to be involvement of all stakeholders and commitment and consensus on that. Only then I think you should proceed. And this is by law. So it needs good governance with good decision-making process, but also a monitoring process afterwards, and of course penalization in the end if things go wrong. And also for the international organizations, or they should really be bound by a good terms of reference, and they know how to operate.
Thank you for that observation. Thank you for more of an observation than a question. I understand, but
no,
very
it was
important.
observation, accommodation. There are tools in hand.
Thank you. Okay, so we had. I would like to take the two more questions that we had, and then come back to you, and then feel free to pick and choose the question you guys want to respond to. Okay, please over to you, and please let's be quite precise.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Honest panel. I'm very new to this. I just wanted to understand better the alternatives.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. We'll come back to that. We'll park that question for the end. And then we have our colleague here in the front.
I'm a bit new to this also. And I had a question about when you do want to do politics on that, when you want to fight against these subjects. I see there's a lot of local initiatives. And there's also talked about a moratorium and good governance at international organizations. But when you do want to do politics on that, who do you address to fight? And is it like the local government? Is it regional powers? Is it the corporations? Well, where do you act when you want to do politics about this subject?
Great. So feel free to whoever wants to respond.
Yeah, to answer the question, I think the greatest lesson of what happened to us last 2023 is the importance of building a movement. As I've said earlier, what made us release the kind of horrific experience is the social movement in our country, not just locally but also internationally. So it's really important for us to support each other, for the local communities to fight for the environment and their rights, and also for people from the other countries to also support the locals. I think in our country there are many cases of enforced disappearances, but our case is really rare. It just happened that there's a big movement in our country that pushes it. So even though it's a really terrible experience, when I look back at it, it's really inspiring. After I was released, I am more inspired to see that there are a lot of people supporting our cause to stop these reclamation projects and sand extraction. That's really inspiring for me. Every time people say that, what made you still continue? The state are still, I'm still being surveilled. Our case were just dismissed. But as I've said, I have more reason to continue. We have more reason to continue. We have communities who have nothing to eat at the moment, who have their children, they cannot send to school. We have a natural climate defense under threat, and we have a future to fight for. We have more reason to fight for than to have anything to be afraid of. So yeah, the answer is build a movement.
Yeah, I can try the last question about how do you do politics, or how do we do politics?
Where do you do it?
Yeah, so we have been partnering with the organizations here and a number of others as well, and they do, you do take care of community organizing, mobilizations, advocating, lobbying. It's a dirty word, but that's what it is. Policymakers and politicians on that end, and we complement it with that work on the EU and the Netherlands, and we're very precise in identifying the actors and institutions that are involved. So we've spent a lot of time engaging, not always that fruitfully, but engaging nonetheless with a lot of the actors on the Dutch side, for instance, together with our partners and other organizations. And specifically in relation to law, like the CSDDD process at the EU level that is now being killed off, and the due diligence law that arose in the Netherlands that I've shelved as well. So it's a bit of an uphill battle. There are marginal wins, but we do it by strategic partnerships on both ends. There we go. And we're very specific in who we target.
Wants to
try it? You can. Yeah. Oh my God.
I think there is only one alternative. It's to stop dredging. It's to stop the damage. Because you see, in the Maldives, let's take the Maldives case, we have had dredging happening in the name of land scarcity and a housing crisis, which is the political hook that drives everybody. So this sells politically, but this has no meaning in practice, because we have about 50 pieces of land reclaimed, so-called reclaimed, which is also a misnomer by its, the language itself is a problem here. Hardly any of this land is used. So reclamation as a practice is done as a political activity. We have politicians who tell us that when in office, they're actually signing the piece of paper to do massive dredging projects. When they are out of office, they are saying that actually reclamation, the extent of reclamation in this country is excessive. But these are the very people who are doing it when they are in decision-making positions. So that is our challenge. That is why we call them out for the hypocrisy. That is the problem here. We have extreme political hypocrisy when it comes to this massive industry, and we have, good governance may be a solution, but actually, from where we are standing, good governance is not possible in a volatile political environment where governance is weak. So these are actually exploited. These weaknesses are being exploited by large transnational corporations who are in this industry, and that is where the gaps are. So that is why Both Ends is so important, because they are able to explain to us, these are the mechanisms that are in place to do what is happening in your countries. And that is where we get to learn what is actually happening. And that is where, it's all tied up, the corruption, the political malfeasance, the weak governance. So these are all interlinked, and it's a web of problems about which we don't know enough. So for us, where we stand, we know that our biodiversity loss and our island integrity loss, as the research shows us, as we see ourselves, is just too much. So the only solution to this is to stop the destruction. We are talking about complete erasure of finite ecosystems. We are talking about situations where marine protected areas being written off to enable these massive projects. So it's not a solution to, it's not an option for us anymore. As we know, we don't have time. In the Maldives, certainly, we depend on coral. Our defenses are coral reefs, and the ocean is beating. The corals are in stress always. So we are not going to find a situation in the future where the circumstances are any better for the corals. So the crisis of our defenses is a huge issue that we can no longer ignore. And that is why we have to stop.
Thank you, Humay. Thank you. Very clear words to end on, actually. But I want to just paraphrase your question in the last couple of minutes. This thing is blinking at me. Just to wrap up, I just want to rephrase that question and pose it to all of you. And if you could just be, again, unfortunately, very brief, but people will stick around. If you have more questions, please do come and speak to our panelists. We'll bring up a QR code with more information. There's a brilliant report called Dredging Destruction. That we brought copies of, so come and get those. But as a last question to all of you, and just maybe in 1 or 2 sentences, and maybe Stephanie will start with you and go this way round. Given that what we've been discussing is a systemic issue, it takes all of us to act, right? So we have a room full of people here. They may come from different backgrounds. They might be academics, they might be scientists, they might be civil society. What can people in this room do to support the struggle?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be happy to chat more about alternatives if you would stick around as well. But I would say, and I'll implore all of you to take what you've heard today and go speak to a colleague or a friend about it. As you can tell, very popular at parties. But then bring it back to send and what you do. Because I bet my money is what you do is very much connected, especially if you work in this ocean space, very much connected to sand, more than you think. And the more we connect the sand issue to different and other ocean causes, the better of a chance we have at protecting our ocean and the people whose lives depend on it.
Thank you. And okay, very quickly, all I have to say is that please hear our stories. Please follow these stories. Please learn about these realities of coastal communities, because we don't want to be climate refugees. And certainly, I don't think anybody wants us knocking on your doors when climate change is going to make great hell wherever you happen to be as well. So this is not an option. So resist with us, join us, spread the word, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, so we've already heard that it's a systematic problem. So we need to look at the system of extraction more critically, and more immediately we need your support and solidarity. If you're a researcher, help us learn more about the impacts. If you're an NGO or a CSO, give us solidarity and amplify our campaign in your countries. If you're a funding organization, support us materially. We need all the help we can get. And as you can see, it's very urgent. The problem is here. And before I got here, a fisherwoman is crying because she was forced to sell her boat, which is her last resource. And so the problem is very immediate, and we need your support as soon as possible.
Okay, for me, let's do collaboration stronger in the future to protect ocean, to protect community, to protect coastal women, and realize ocean justice.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. Calling everyone to support and give solidarity to our local movements. It can be logistically, it can be a research, it can even be warm bodies when we do our protests in our country. We believe that anyone here can do something about it. Of course, every one of us has something we're good at, and probably can use it to support the local communities. We can, logistics, academically, financially, anything will do, any support will do in our communities. And I'm calling this with a sense of urgency.
Yeah, to add what everyone has said, I just hope that everyone can walk away from the session with a sense of urgency and awareness on this topic that's really, really overlooked. And more generally, that we will become more aware, if you're not already, of the transnational dimensions behind a lot of the disruption that we've been talking about at this conference, but not naming specifically. There are actors in countries and financial flows and policies behind all of these industries, whether it's trawling, whether it's deep sea mining, and whatnot. And that is really something that needs to be brought to the forefront. It doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Thank you, Walter. And this is the QR code where if you want to find more information, please scan it. And thanks again for coming. I hope you can go out and spread the word. Thanks so much, everybody.